Senior NPR editor Uri Berliner, who recently penned a lengthy op-ed critiquing the lack of ideological diversity at his place of work, National Public Radio, has resigned. Now, his decision came after he was suspended without pay for 5 days over his decision to write the piece in the Free Press. Now, the Free Press is Barry Weiss's platform. I think his decision to write for the Free Press probably had something to do with the backlash that he dealt with over at NPR following his critical piece. We'll get to that in a moment. But he made the announcement on Twitter today, sharing a message that he sent to the relatively new CEO over at NPR. Her name is Catherine Marr. He says, "My resignation letter to NPR CEO," and in it there's a screenshot. "I am resigning from NPR, a great American institution where I have worked for 25 years. I don't support calls to defund NPR. I respect the integrity of my colleagues and wish for NPR to thrive and do important journalism. But I cannot work in a newsroom where I am disparaged by a new CEO whose divisive views confirm the very problem at NPR I cite in my Free Press essay." Now, over the last few days, there have been some old tweets, old speeches, all sorts of things that have been uncovered in regard to the relatively new CEO, Catherine Marr. She's very much on the left wing. She's very much critical of Donald Trump. She provided cover for some of the looting that took place in the summer of 2020, was very much supportive of BLM, as we were here at the time as well. So, there have been some criticisms about how she was chosen as the head of NPR, considering her significant political biases. To be quite frank though, I think that the CEO, not really involved in the editorial decisions at NPR, the CEO raises money, okay? That's what the CEO does. But the CEO raises money from potential donors who might not really take kindly to fairly or accurately reporting on both sides when it comes to certain political issues. So look, let's put her aside. I'm sure more will develop about the current CEO at NPR, but I wanna focus on the criticisms or the critiques that Berliner had in regard to NPR and what his resignation means, right? How can we analyze this and what does it mean for media in general? So I wanna go back to the piece that got him in trouble in the first place, right? It was titled, "I've been at NPR for 25 years, here's how we lost America's trust." Now, he summarizes his basic thesis as follows. "It's true NPR has always had a liberal bent, but during most of my tenure here, an open-minded, curious culture prevailed. Today, those who listen to NPR or read its coverage online find something different. The distilled worldview of a very small segment of the US population." And honestly, I think he's totally right about that. He talks about how there was an increase in, I guess, diversity as it pertains to gender, sex, stuff like that, race, right? But there was no ideological diversity, and that's what he kind of took issue with. He states that the change began during the election of Donald Trump. That's when the coverage really started to change, and there was this obsessive focus on the Russia collusion investigation. He wrote that persistent rumors that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia over the election became the catnip that drove reporting. But when the Mueller report found no credible evidence of collusion, NPR's coverage was notably sparse.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
He took issue with the fact that NPR didn't take responsibility for, the direction the reporting had taken in when it came to Russia collusion. He gave a specific example of how reporters just took whatever Adam Schiff, a Democratic congressman, had to say at face value. It was almost like gospel. They just printed it without questioning it. And yeah, that's gonna lead you in the wrong direction. You should fact check and you should be skeptical of any statement coming from any elected lawmaker. Let's just keep it real. But his argument here was that they didn't do that. there was more. During a meeting with colleagues, I listened as one of NPR's best and most fair-minded journalists said it was good we weren't following the Hunter Biden laptop story because it could help Trump. So look, journalism has basically changed significantly over the last several years. So some people might not know this, but a journalist, like an actual journalist who's not engaging in political activism, is not supposed to engage in political activism, number one, and is supposed to simply give readers or viewers, whatever the outlet is, information about the world around them as it is, right? And so the idea that a journalist would say, no, we shouldn't cover this story because it could help Trump, that's activism. That's totally activism, right? And that goes against what traditional journalism is supposed to do, and he took issue with that as well. He also pointed a finger at the former NPR CEO, John Lansing, who took the position in 2019, only 1 year before the murder of George Floyd. And then Berliner claims that NPR leadership gave the following guidance in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. Race and identity became paramount in nearly every aspect of the workplace. Journalists were required to ask everyone we interviewed their race, gender, and ethnicity, among other questions, and had to enter it in a centralized tracking system. This isn't creepy at all. This is totally fine. We were given unconscious bias training sessions. Growing DEI staff offered regular meetings imploring us to start talking about race. Here, let me make a suggestion here. A workplace that is obsessed with race and is encouraged to constantly talk about race, not gonna be a great work environment to be in. It's gonna be a pretty hostile work environment, and it's gonna lead to a lot of groupthink. And that was another thing that he pointed to. So here's what this all looked like in practice. He writes stories on how the Beatles and bird names are racially problematic. I came across that story, by the way, about bird names being problematic, and didn't want to cover it on the show because I thought it was stupid, but I'll continue. I'm gonna say it again, it was stupid. It was a stupid story. It was a stupid story. If you're offended by that, that's totally fine. You can be offended by that. No constitutional protections from being offended. But if you think a story about needing to rename birds because bird names are racist is super important as our country burns, as our government funds the slaughter of children in another country, I don't know what to say. It's a stupid story. It's stupid. It's not important. It's just not. There's a lot more stuff happening, not only in our country, but around the world that's way more important, that has a bigger impact on people of color. Okay, but yeah, let's talk about bird names. Anyway, I'm like losing my mind here. I'm losing my mind here, I really am, because I don't understand what the real priorities are. Let me start that graphic again. Stories on how the Beatles and bird names are racially problematic and others that are alarmingly divisive, justifying looting with claims that fears about crime are racist, and suggesting that Asian Americans who oppose affirmative action have been manipulated by white conservatives, which by the way, is a pretty freaking racist thing to say. Oh, these dumb Asians, they're being manipulated by white conservatives. Really, you don't think that's a racist thing to think? Berliner states that eventually an unspoken consensus emerged, and basically that consensus was, you don't question this, this is the direction we're going in. There's no difference of opinion, there's no debate. Highlighting the suffering of Palestinians, and this is the area where I disagreed with him because I don't think NPR did this, but he says highlighting the suffering of Palestinians at almost every turn while downplaying the atrocities of October 7th, overlooking how Hamas intentionally puts Palestinian lives in peril, and giving little weight to the explosion of anti-Semitic hate around the world. From the reporting I saw on the conflict, on the war over at NPR, that is not the sense that I got. But the sense that I did get, something that was demonstrably true, was that there was one perspective in most of the reporting. And that one perspective was a left-wing perspective, which is fine. I mean, showing what the left wing's perspective is on a given topic is important. But it's also important to inform your readers about what the perspective of the other side is and to share that as accurately as you can. Don't straw man it. Don't, draw conclusions that aren't really founded in reality. It's just important to inform the public about what the other side actually is, what they actually believe. Otherwise, the country is gonna continue being divided. It'll increase in its, division. And it's not helpful. It's not helpful to literally omit information to the audience that they should know about. But anyway, so he ends up getting suspended. The reason why he's suspended is because he's supposed to ask for permission before he does something like write an op-ed for a different publication. He didn't do that, and so he got in trouble. He's suspended without pay for 5 days. But I'm gonna fast forward a little bit to graphic 11 here because something else happened. Even though he didn't name a single one of his colleagues that he had an issue with, his colleagues were deeply offended. And so Ben Mullen on X writes, about 50 NPR employees signed a letter to CEO Catherine Marr and top editor Edith Chapin calling for, among other things, a public rebuke of the factual inaccuracies and elisions in Uri Berliner's Free Press essay. So look, I'm not surprised by this. Obviously, he's gonna go out there, he's going to openly write this piece criticizing his place of work and his colleagues, even though he didn't name any of them. His colleagues are gonna get offended by that and they're going to lash out. And honestly, I don't blame them for feeling that way. I don't blame them for lashing out. But he obviously hit a nerve here. And in the end, he gets pushed out. So I don't know if this was the right strategy in trying to change things at NPR. In fact, I think that as a veteran editor, he probably had an opportunity to, in subtle ways, move the reporting in a direction that he felt was more appropriate. Yeah, he'd get some backlash, but at least try, right? And if that doesn't work out, then sure, you write the piece criticizing NPR and see if that works, but I knew it wasn't gonna work. I knew he was gonna get pushed out. And besides which, after you write something like that, you're gonna go back to your place of work where you just criticized your colleagues. You didn't name them, I get it, but you just criticized your colleagues. It's gonna be a super hostile place for you to work at. So what I take from this story following his resignation, it's not really a take, it's more a question. Is there a place, and more importantly, is there a market for journalism anymore? Because I feel that most people are seeking outlets that tell them what they want to hear. Most people in America right now don't really look to be challenged. And if they get offered a perspective that might conflict with some of their preconceived notions, they typically don't take well to that. And that's what scares me. Because while I feel that I've made mistakes in my past and I did not seek out differing perspectives in good faith, and I have to take responsibility for that, I'm in a different place in my life where I wanna know what the truth is when it comes to various issues in this country and around the world. And you don't get to the bottom of any incident, any situation, any political news story unless you have an open mind and you hear out all the different sides that are involved. And you really take care to do fact checking, to investigate to the best of your ability. That's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of time. Takes a lot of energy and a lot of heartache sometimes. But is there even an audience for that? Is there a readership for that? Does anyone really want it? I'm sure there are some Americans who do, but I haven't seen a market large enough to actually support that kind of journalistic model. And that's what depresses me. I don't know, I have no idea. But what I do know is if you are someone who's interested in traditional journalism, who wants to go out there and give people accurate information, and who wants to take responsibility when you get the story wrong, there might not be a workplace for you in America anymore. That's terrifying. That's what worries me the most about this story. I mean, Berliner, I think he's gonna be fine. He'll find a place to work at. but he'll probably find himself at another place of work that also has an ideological, bent that people are kind of discouraged from deviating from. I just think we need to have a moment as Americans to really consider whether we're okay with being ignorant about half the country that you don't agree with politically, because hearing their thoughts or hearing their perspective offends you so much. Like, that's where we're at right now. And so diversity is great, but it should go beyond skin color or sexual orientation or gender. Diversity of thought is where we see the most personal growth, where we have opportunities for personal growth, but that's not really something that's celebrated or encouraged in newsrooms across this country right now, and that's depressing.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below, because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.